Now, as promised, the news in detail. Let's begin now with our top story. U.S. Special Envoy Zalmay Khalilzad has arrived in Islamabad for talks on reviving the Afghan peace process. His trip follows last week's Afghan presidential elections, which were marred by a low turnout and sporadic violence. Khalilzad reached Islamabad after concluding his visit to China. A Taliban delegation headed by Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar will also arrive in Islamabad for talks. Taliban spokesperson Sohail Shaheen said the delegation will hold important talks with the country's officials. The U.S. and Taliban were close to a deal last month when President Trump called off the peace process. Well, let's now cross over to Islamabad, where we're joined now by our correspondent, Isa Naqvi. Isa, thanks for joining us. Now, the U.S. Special Representative Isa has already arrived in Islamabad, while the Taliban delegation is expected soon as well. What other details can you tell us?
Oh, well, it's a very important day, and it was just last week that Prime Minister Imran Khan in New York hoped that Taliban and the U.S. could once again revive the talks process that was scuttled last month. And it is in less than a week's time that Islamabad will today be hosting a talk between the United States and Taliban. The Taliban delegation is expected soon in Islamabad, while the special envoy on Afghanistan of President Donald Trump, Mr. Zalmay Khalilzad, he is here since yesterday, and they'll be holding important meetings. And although not a formal schedule of meetings between the Afghan Taliban's delegation, which is led by Mullah Abdul Ghani brother and include important Taliban leaders, has been issued by the Foreign Office or has been issued by the spokesperson's office of Taliban. But the sources claim that it's not just a meeting with the U.S. envoy. They are expected to hold some important meetings with the Pakistani officials. And if the things go through well, there is a possibility that the Afghan delegation might also call on Prime Minister Imran Khan, but that is not confirmed yet.
All right, so you've already told us why this meeting is crucial, Isa, but tell us at this point in time what we're expecting possibly to come out of all of this, out of this crucial meeting at this time, of course, after the presidential elections, after the U.S. At least paused the peace process.
I have also spoken with a few diplomats who are keeping a close eye on the talk process between Taliban and the U.S. and they believe that the very fact that Taliban delegation is coming to Islamabad and the Afghan envoy is already in Islamabad means that they will be meeting, and the process that was scuttled, and it was scuttled right at the time when it was expected that they were just about to sign a peace pact with the U.S. Now, if the talks are resuming, there could possibly be a resumption of the dialogue, which would lead to the signing of the deal that could not be signed last month. And also, since these are the two most important stakeholders of the three stakeholders, the main stakeholders in Afghanistan, the Afghan government, the Taliban, and the U.S., if two of them are on the same page, and then Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan, in his visit to New York last month, in his meeting with President Donald Trump, he had already expressed the hope that once that deal is signed, he can play his role in bringing Taliban and the Afghan government on a table of negotiations. So if the things go well in the talks today in Islamabad, and we have a peace deal in some near future, then the next phase where Pakistan would be playing its part in bringing the two other stakeholders on table, that phase will start.
Very well, Isa. We, of course, appreciate you for us. That was Isa Naqvi speaking to us from the Pakistani capital. Let's now get us some analysis on this as well. We're joined now by retired Major General Ijaz Awan. General Awan, as always, we appreciate your time here at Indus News. General, it seems that both the U.S. and the Taliban want to resolve issues and find peace in Afghanistan. How serious then do you think today's meeting is?
I think there is no doubt that America desires to enter into a peace negotiation and wishes to conclude the deal which was about to be concluded, say about 2 weeks back or 3 weeks back when it was scuttled by a tweet. But my opinion is that this was done by design and not by default. Because if this deal was signed, then Taliban would have had an upper hand in the coming elections, which have been recently held, and the turnout was very poor. So they never wanted, America and the Ashraf Ghani government never wanted to give an impression that Taliban have succeeded in striking a deal and forcing America to vacate, to call it a day and go out of Afghanistan. So they never wanted to give this kind of success to the Taliban. But now, since the elections have been held and the result is yet a few weeks away, there is a probability that they would restart the negotiation. They were in any case to resume these talks, and America would like to get out of Afghanistan because there is no point in staying there. Pakistan would also play its role, but maybe, in my view, maybe they have a hint that Ashraf Ghani government or Abdullah, they have secured some percentage of votes, and they may be able to find a government to keep the Taliban out of power sharing, and that's why they are getting close once again.
General Alwan, I wonder, can we just pick up where things left off, i.e., can both sides just continue the dialogue and restart, as you said, from where they left off? Or do you think things have changed? Are there newer obstacles, and what are those obstacles now?
In my case, if the Taliban have been marginalized in the result of these elections that were held under the Ashraf Ghani government, because initially, if we recollect, Taliban were demanding these elections under an interim national setup, and they were not very confident to get them conducted by the Ashraf Ghani government. But America, somehow or the other, and the Ashraf Ghani government prevailed. They found an excuse for scuttling the talks or for temporarily halting the process of peace, and they went into election. So if they have got the results that they desire, then, and the Taliban have been marginalized in the outcome of election, then they may like to enter into a deal. But this may, I'm afraid, this may affect the post-election stability in Afghanistan.
All right, General Alwan, we'll leave it there at that. But of course, sir, as always, we appreciate your time and, of course, your expert insight here at Indus News. Let's move on with the news now. Tokyo says North Korea has fired a ballistic missile from waters off its east coast towards the Sea of Japan. North Korea, though, has not yet confirmed the launch. Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga says the missile reached Japan's exclusive economic zone. He said there are no reports of any threats to fishing boats in the area. Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has condemned the launch and has expressed concern over Pyongyang's behavior.
We'll hold National Security Council and will discuss about the situation and our measures. We'll continue to cooperate with the international community, especially the US, and will take all possible measures to protect the safety of the nationals as we stay on alert.
Well, South Korea's military says it believes the weapon was launched from a submarine off the port of Wonsan in the country's east. The launch comes ahead of Pyongyang's resumption of denuclearization talks with Washington on October 5th. Well, in a fresh act of state terrorism, occupying forces have martyred another youth in Indian-occupied Kashmir's Gwadar district. 7 youth have been martyred by occupation forces in Naranag area of the same district this week. Earlier, Indian forces confessed to arresting 144 minors since the illegal annexation of the valley. In a report submitted to an Indian Supreme Court committee, they admitted that some of these minors were as young as 9 years old. New Delhi's crushing curfew and communications blackout in Indian-occupied Kashmir has now entered its 59th day. Pakistan has called for a more active U.S. role to help lift the curfew in occupied Kashmir. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says the U.S. must ensure the rights of Kashmiris and resolution of the dispute as per their wishes. Speaking to visiting U.S. Congressman, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi appreciated President Trump's offer to mediate on Kashmir. The Foreign Minister also briefed the delegation on Pakistan's role in seeking a political solution to the Afghan conflict. Representatives Jim Himes and Sean Maloney of the U.S. House Committee on Intelligence are on a visit to Pakistan. Now, Pakistan's Foreign Office has summoned the Indian Deputy High Commissioner, Mr. Gaurav Ahluwalia. The Foreign Office spokesman, Dr. Mohammad Faisal, condemned the unprovoked ceasefire violations by Indian occupation forces along the line of control on the 1st of October. Due to unprovoked firing by the Indian Army along the line of control, an old woman embraced martyrdom, while 3 other civilians sustained serious injuries. Indian occupation forces along the LOC have been continuously targeting civilian-populated areas with artillery fire. Faisal urged the Indian side to respect the 2003 ceasefire arrangement, investigate these and other incidents of ceasefire violations. He also instructed Indian forces to respect the ceasefire in letter and spirit and maintain peace on the LOC and the working boundary. Well, Pakistan has handed over the body of an Indian border security force soldier to Indian authorities. The Pakistani military says the soldier drowned while crossing a stream in occupied Kashmir along the working boundary. The body of the Indian soldier was swept away towards the Pakistani side. The Indian Army requested Pakistan Rangers to search for the missing soldier. Rangers recovered the body during a search operation and handed it over to India as per military protocol. Time now for a break. I'll be back, though, with much more news after that. Stay tuned. Let's begin this segment of the Bulletin with Libya, where Matiga International Airport in the capital Tripoli has been hit by an airstrike. The UN-recognized government claims the attack was conducted by forces loyal to Eastern Commander Khalifa Haftar. Government officials say the raid set on fire a factory belonging to the Libyan Civil Aviation Authority. They say the airport has been closed, but no casualties have been reported so far. Government officials also say they thwarted 2 ground attacks by Haftar's forces on the Ramla front line. Forces loyal to Haftar launched a campaign in April to capture the capital Tripoli. Clashes between the 2 sides have left over 1,000 people dead and wounded nearly 6,000, according to the World Health Organization. On to Iraq, where 2 people have been killed and 200 injured as protesters clashed with police in Baghdad. People were protesting, against unemployment, corruption, and bad governance. Over 1,000 protesters descended on the capital, demanding major changes to address bad governance. Riot police used tear gas, water cannons, and live fire to disperse protesters. The lack of public services, water shortages, and unemployment triggered the demonstration. It was the biggest demonstration against Prime Minister Adel Mahdi since he has come to power last year. The World Bank says youth unemployment in Iraq stands at 25%. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he is offering constructive proposals to the EU to break the Brexit impasse. He said the UK's plan includes some customs checks in Ireland after Brexit. Prime Minister Johnson said the customs checks will be minimal and won't involve new infrastructure. Johnson has insisted the UK's exit from the EU will go ahead with or without a deal. The EU says the UK has not provided proposals to replace the Irish backstop. The UK is set to leave the bloc on the 31st of October. On to Spain, where Catalan separatists have called for mass civil disobedience if their leaders are convicted for their part in a failed bid for secession. The 12 defendants are on trial for holding a banned referendum and issuing a short-lived declaration of independence. 18,000 protesters have taken to Barcelona's streets to mark the 2nd anniversary of the referendum. Protesters chanted anti-government slogans and called for the release of their jailed leaders. The separatist momentum, though, has slowed. Tensions, though, have flared ahead of the Supreme Court verdict in the case later this month. In eastern Finland, a woman has been killed and 10 others have been wounded in a sword attack at a vocational college in the city of Kuopio. Witnesses say the victim, who was a student, was stabbed in the neck and stomach after the assailant barged into a classroom. Police say the suspect also had a gun, but have yet to establish a motive for the attack. Authorities have not named the suspect, but identified him as a student at the same college. India has topped the world's league table in curbing freedom of expression on social media platforms. A UK-based tech report says New Delhi made the highest number of requests to Facebook and Google for content removal in the past 7 years. Comparatech said New Delhi has been on the censorship top spot for the last 10 years. It said India made over 77,000 requests for content removal between 2013 and 2018. New Delhi also tops the individual list for requests made to Facebook with 70,000 complaints. The tech firm said India makes up 33% of the overall requests for censorship made to Facebook. The report said this shows the Indian government's high appetite for censoring public sentiment and gagging dissent. Well, the United Nations Refugee Agency says more than 1,000 migrants have died in the Mediterranean this year. It is the 6th year in a row that the bleak milestone has been reached. This report has more.
Every year, thousands of migrants attempt to cross the Mediterranean Sea to reach Europe. They endure a long journey in extreme conditions, during which many of them die. UNHCR spokeswoman Liz Throssell says fewer attempts to cross the Mediterranean this year show the journey is very dangerous.
Yeah, the figures do show that we have passed the very sad milestone of 1,000 deaths so far in 2019, and that is the 6th year in a row that we have passed 1,000 deaths. What I can stress is, of course, the numbers of people attempting to cross the Mediterranean are much lower, so that points to the fact that the journeys themselves are much more dangerous.
The United Nations Refugee Agency has called for more search and rescue operations to save lives at sea. The UN has also underlined the role played by charity boats in sea rescue operations. Liz Throssell said NGO rescue boats should not be criminalized.
It's important, first of all, to have the capacity there to save people lives, to rescue them from the sea. And in this, the NGO boats have played an incredibly important role. And we really stress once again that they should not be stigmatized or criminalized.
The International Organization for Migration says 15,000 people have died trying to cross the Mediterranean since 2014.
Well, at the Syrian refugee camp Ain Issa, an uncertain future awaits foreign ISIS orphans. Displaced Syrian women volunteer as caretakers, saying the children are still visibly scarred after living with their late parents. For more on that, watch this report.
In a large tent housing 24 orphans, the female caretakers trace the trauma in these children and fear for their interpersonal development. Aged 18 months to 13 years old, they were born to parents from Russia, Uzbekistan, Indonesia, Tajikistan, Egypt and Iraq. With limited resources, the caretakers aim to create a safe haven for the children to grow in.
They don't like the food. The way they play together is not really playing. They play at shooting each other or planting the mines in the earth. These things are still planted in their heads because there's nothing to make them forget about it. They don't study or go and play with the little ones. It's been taken away from them.
After years of leading the fight against the militants, Syria's Kurds hold thousands in detention camps, 24 of which found their way to Ain Issa. The camp has received no aid for the orphans and is struggling to provide for them despite the many calls to the international community.
The other organizations have not given anything to help the children. We ask for them to give clothes, food, drink as well as to help rehabilitate them to get rid of the ISIS ideology.
As the Syrian war goes on, the affected children look towards a grim future with the remnants of their past still fresh in their minds.
Well, in Norway, a fashion show highlighting the plight of Kashmiris and their freedom struggle has been arranged in Oslo. The lineup of the fashion show contained beautiful tunics in multicolored embroideries, the region's traditional wear. It wasn't a typical ramp walk. Activism and theatrics added to the spectacle, highlighting the need to preserve the valley's culture. The gesture was appreciated and particularly lauded by Kashmiris on social media. Pakistan has opened its deep-sea Gwadar port for transit trade. The Ministry of Maritime Affairs says the first shipment will arrive on October 8th and traffic will gradually increase. Officials say the port's main competitors would be Singapore and Dubai. They say incentives such as no cargo demurrage charges and 3 months storage facilities will help bring business to the port. The modern port is expected to dominate maritime trade traffic through the Arabian Sea and the Indian Ocean in the near future. Asian stock markets, meanwhile, have traded lower amid renewed fears of a global economic slowdown. After returning from a holiday, Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index declined following a dip in the shares of Chinese tech giant Tencent. Japan's Nikkei 225 also shed 0.5% as shares of SoftBank Group and Fanuc dropped. Reeling from the slowing trend, South Korea's Kospi has also slipped 1.31%. Australia's ASX 200 fell over 1% as most sectors declined. Time now to find out what the weather is like around the world. And you're all caught up. Thank you for watching this bulletin. Here are today's news.